Sometimes we give advice,
but we don't always follow it. I've written and then rewritten, edited and then re-edited Party Like It's 1996 3 times. And even on the final product, that I will say I'm still proud of, always feels like there's something missing about it, something more to talk about. The idealized version of that video that I think of at the beginning of writing is almost never truly going to come to fruition because of how I grow as a person after the video releases and how the world changes around us as well. So the fix to that is what I'm considering to be an expansion to my previous video.
Imprisoned for 10,000 years. Banished from my own homeland. And now you dare enter my realm. You are not prepared. You are not prepared!
Palworld is a survival crafting creature collector with elements from Pokémon, Monster Hunter, and Ark Survival. This game was announced back in 2021 on June 5th, but the reason it's sparking so much conversation now is because it's breaking records on Steam's all-time peak and its current players' peak. At the time of writing for this video, it just surpassed Counter-Strike's all-time peak at 1.8 million, but it also did just surpass 2 million anyway, so I guess fuck my writing, hey. In conjunction with its skyrocketing popularity is the volatile discussion around plagiarism and how it designs its monsters. It's inevitable that big games with similar categories will get called copies. It's the lowest hanging fruit in any industry, but it gets thrown around all the time by either low IQ fucking retards or kids. Oh my god, do you remember when fucking people call like Pyro and Leafy clones of each other? Oh my god, that shit is so cool.
Pyro's such a copy of Leafy, man, I swear. He does the same thing, they play the same game.
Who fucking cares? The accusation in this case is more credible because when analysing individual designs and comparing them to Pokémon, I think that it's pretty obvious that the designer working on these characters either was incredibly inspired or incredibly fucking lazy. But I don't think it's very productive to put two characters side by side and say, oh well, look bros, that's literally fucking Pikachu bro. I think the onus is on me to tell you why I think Mimikyu looks like Pikachu instead of just putting them side by side and then saying, well, isn't it obvious, bah? More importantly, however, I want to point the discourse in a direction that uses a system to define whether or not characters are or are not plagiarized, because personally, I find some of these comparisons for these designs incredibly uncompelling. I believe that for an argument about plagiarism to be well established against monsters from Palworld, or even the other way around, if you want to say Pokemon has stolen something from somewhere else, two criteria have to be met. Does the character retain design aspects directly lifted from the compared character? And does the plagiarized character retain an overall similar appearance to the original character? I believe that, at the very least, these are good systems to abide by, even if it's just a baseline, because if we can prove a design is inherently tied to an original character through comparison, then we have a much easier time arguing for plagiarism, because it would logically follow that the reason the designs are so similar is because it was intentionally lifted from something else. I'm going to look at a couple examples across two categories of argument that move me from unconvinced to I'll go to court for Nintendo. To be clear, I think these designs are on the spectrum. There are a lot of comparisons that kind of sit in the middle of the two aspects. Superior and its counterpart Azarobe not only share large design aspects with each other, but other notable Pokemon as well. Funny. But I think they are a middle ground to the discussion and are pretty debatable. For this video, I only want to go over the strongest for and against plagiarism examples just to save time. For this category, we're having a look at Pancham, Esper, and Wooloo. I find these comparisons unconvincing for a number of reasons. Pancham embodies a surprisingly common trait amongst a lot of these designs, even though it has no weight to it and doesn't really make sense to begin with, being that they're the same animal, so it must mean they're the same thing. The only consistency across both designs is that they have a leaf somewhere on them, and that they're panda-like, of course. Arguments like these ultimately harm the credibility of the entire case, because I think that these comparisons are made in bad faith. Esper's case, comparatively, is much more of a convincing order, but I don't think this design meets either of the criteria listed before. Multiple aspects of this design are not shared across both characters. For one, the fluff, eyes, hands, and feet are nothing alike on either character. Number 2, despite having similarities in the facial vibe, with the muted face expression and the dull eyes, I don't believe this argument is good enough to justify itself as plagiarism. Wooloo follows the same argumentation, but is ultimately a much stronger case than the previous two. There are minute aspects of the design that are similar. The ears across both characters and the horns are quite similar, admittedly. The reason I still consider this on the weakest side of the argument is because this general design for sheep is not specific to Pokemon. Shaun the Sheep, for example, is known for this type of design, with the black face and the puffy body. So while they are similar, it's ultimately uncompelling because the design itself is tied to a way to stylize sheep, not to the characters that use it. To summarize the argument, Pokemon do not hold a monopoly on sheep designs. There are, again, a lot more really unconvincing arguments for plagiarism amongst different characters, but to go over all of them would be to nullify the point of the system. I encourage you to go look yourself for a quick little thought experiment if you like. For this next section, I'm going to use a wider variety of examples because I feel like there are so many strong examples of convincing plagiarism that either aren't being talked about or aren't being honed in on. We are going to be looking at Cobalion, Lucario, Cinderace, and Gleam from fucking Yokai Watch. Looking at Cobalion's counterpart is probably the least egregious it's going to get, and that's quite an impressive feat because at first glance, I honest to God thought that this was a different form for Cobalion. Fanglope shares the horns, the fluff at the front, the black streak at the front of the face fade bit, and the lines on the body, as well as the overall appearance looking strikingly similar, with the exception of the cloudy stream aesthetics, which are more akin to the weather trio. I think this is pretty convincing, but a case cannot be built off one piece of evidence on its own. Cinderace is another compelling case that had me thinking at first that this was a bootleg knockoff. Listen, Cinderace is a tough character to explain. I don't know what the fuck... I don't know. Okay? So, this one's a bit off the cuff, because I don't know how the fuck to script this, to be quite honest with you, but we're going to try our best. So, going from top to bottom of the body, number 1, the ears and the middle fluff bit are pretty similar. The torso part, while missing this flower bouquet, I guess, around the neck, share a similar build in the arms with a chubby upper bicep, I guess, and then a lower, still kind of chubby forearm into the 3-pawed hand structure across both characters. And then the pant or shorts, I guess they're shorts, right? They're supposed to be shorts. Share an incredibly similar design with the cuffed legs, as well as the belt design being incredibly similar with the kind of like a pair of undies, but they're spiked. Similar across both characters. It is pretty shockingly similar. I'm not gonna lie. If you put both of these characters on a coloring book for me, I think I would start to color in Cinderace's colors into this character. That's best you get from Cinderace, but I think it's a pretty damning example of characters that, well, this one is kind of... Cinderace is kind of a weird character. Cinderace is a bit like, this is my OC, don't steal. So I think it becomes really clear when different companies try to steal similar designs like this, that, okay, well, this one comes from Pokemon. It's very obvious that this one is a copy of it because it's such a unique design. Cinderace, the reason this is such a blatant example in the Palworld roster is because Cinderace, look, despite all my shitting on him, is quite a unique design in that there's nothing that really resembles this in any other franchise. So when me, a Pokefag, oh my fucking god, goes to a different game and sees, holy shit, I know this exact design, that's fucking Cinderace from Pokemon. It's pretty obvious, like even outside the community. I think if you put these side by side, I just kind of ranted for the last fucking minute, but whatever, that's all you get from me. So, refocusing the discussion now, Lucario is an interesting case because I'm actually unconvinced with just one comparison. I think you have to put multiple pieces of evidence together to justify it as plagiarism. Its direct comparison, Anubis, is similar enough with the overall look and the design inspiration coming directly from the same place suspiciously, but just Anubis alone isn't enough to convince me on whether or not Lucario was plagiarized, however. I think Anubis, in conjunction with Rayhound, are a much more damning argument. The head model is almost the exact same. The stripe down the middle, the ears, the snout, the eyes, and, at first glance, I thought this was just shiny Lucario. Wow. That's pretty fucking blatant. Because I am Lucario. The final character I'd like to go over is Gleam, a character from Yokai Watch, and yes, I am a Pokefag, but I thought it was important to bring this example up when I learned of it because I think it asks a good question. These two characters share the same overall appearance, but they also share individual aspects like the sheath katana, the red cloak, the cuts in the hat, the flame on the top, and the baggy pants. The example that I got shown to compare this to was Hisuian Decidueye, which, sure, on a first glance, they share some similarities, but to argue that this one specifically is Decidueye is not only weakening the argument on the whole, it's also a disservice to the original character. Which asks a great question. Why don't people care when it's Yokai Watch or Digimon that gets plagiarized? Don't they deserve the same recognition in the discussion as the others do? It feels like a part of this discussion, or the reason for people's interest in it, is on the one side using Palworld's success as some kind of
battering ram
to take huge shits all over Nintendo. And then it feels like the defending sides only using examples from Pokemon because they want to defend the billion-dollar company, not because they have any intricate interest in plagiarism as a whole. Both sides are doing justifiable things, i.e. criticizing Nintendo and Game Freak, i.e. calling out plagiarism. But they are doing them for the wrong reasons. Supporting an admittedly incredibly successful game that employs shitty tactics like plagiarism just to get back at an admittedly shitty company doesn't make you look justified. I think it makes you look fucking retarded. And then the other side, defending that same company just because you like the IP creates, makes you look fucking stupid. And it completely misses the entire point of the discussion. So what's it all for then? It's a real shame, because I think this game has come out at the right time for fans of Pokemon, of course. Game Freak needs to be pushed and prodded to accomplish not only making a good Pokemon game, fucking shamefully enough, but also needs to be pushed to do something more with the franchise. This game should have been the competition they so desperately needed to get their shit together. However, I just cannot in good faith claim that just because Game Freak handles Pokemon poorly, it gives people free reign to plagiarize and fuck over other people that own the IP in the first place. This game, without a shadow of a doubt in my mind, has committed plagiarism by its very definition, and as a result I cannot recommend it, and I think that purchasing this game is actually a morally condemnable action. This game should have been an example of what we wanted from Game Freak. It should have been the spearhead for our outcry against Game Freak and against Pokemon. But this game is not a good enough role model for what the games industry should be. It's quite frankly the opposite of what I want to see in any game from any IP or from any company. If this game suddenly overnight changed all of the designs to something completely different to the point where plagiarism is completely impossible to argue, then I would recommend this game, because the facts are, it's a fun game. It does exactly what Game Freak should have been doing for the last 5 years. Make a good fucking game. So, what does Pokemon need right now? I think that, firstly, Pokemon needs an official battle platform, specifically designed for multiplayer battles and competitions. One that ideally copies Pokemon Showdown's way of handling the overall experience, designing and customizing Pokemon from a screen and jumping straight into a game. No leveling, no interacting with the overworld, just straight battles. I will also add that after the controversy regarding cheated Pokemon, there needs to be a system that will tell you if a Pokemon is genned or not. Here's a video summarizing that fucking meme. Good luck, boys. Secondly, the next couple years of Pokemon games, on the whole, need to be home runs. Ever since Generation 8, Pokemon has been marred with controversy after controversy. I will reiterate a point from the previous video because I think it's pretty poignant in how I feel and how the general consensus on the outlook of Pokemon is when there are articles detailing consistent fuck-ups in the series. It doesn't matter what Game Freak has or has not done to improve the franchise, because it looks fucking embarrassing to not only remove content, but also to launch games in a buggy and broken state, especially after the directors decided they can't be fucked to add in every Pokemon. When you consider the reason for removing the National Dex in the first place was to give more development time to the game overall, only to subsequently create the worst controversy regarding content quality in the series, I think it only emphasizes the negative outlook on the games. Part 3 is just to keep moving forward. I'm assuming right now when I say that, I think Game Freak has probably learned a lot in the last few years. Despite all the bitching and crying over shit that I'm incredibly lucky to even have the ability to bitch and cry about, I still really care about Pokemon, and I care about the games industry at large. It's clear that there have been real pushes to change Pokemon in a good way. The character writing for not only base game characters like Nemona is not only through the roof, the arc for one of the newer characters, Kieran, has been pretty entertaining to watch. This is still pretty awkward without voice acting. And that's that. That's what I thought about that. To be clear, don't hate anyone for liking Palworld. I think if you like the character designs from Palworld, I think it's completely fine. But I don't think it's doing good things. So, that's that. If you disagree with anything I said, being like the definitions of like the plagiarism or anything, or like you thought maybe I said something fucking stupid, pull up, comment, fuck your mum. Not fuck your mum, pull up in the comments, I guess. Fucking who gives a shit. I'll be back in like 12 months for the video equivalent of Wrath of the Lich King, because I'm not putting this shit down until I get a 3rd installment. Good luck, boys.